Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This is Terry Donahue. I'm a principal with Springwater Wealth Management, and I will be administering today's webinar with Brian Farr on the psychology of money. Springwater Wealth Management is an independent, fee-only wealth management firm with offices in Oregon and California. We host periodic conversations with individuals who bring unique perspectives to the broad topic of money. Before we get started, just like to remind you about a few things. Your cameras have been turned off and your microphones have been muted. So we can't see you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. The conversation today will run about 30 minutes and we will have time for questions. And the best way to get those questions to us is to put those in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. I will introduce your questions later on in the presentation, assuming we do have time for those. This webinar will be recorded and it can be viewed later today and at any time on Springwater Wealth Management's YouTube channel. Today we are hosting a conversation with Brian Farr on the psychology of money. Brian has a BA in history from Stanford University and a master's in counseling psychology from Lewis and Clark College. Prior to becoming a licensed professional counselor, Brian had a varied and successful career. In his 20s, he was a professional commodity broker and a member of the Chicago Board of Trade. In his 30s, he was the owner and general manager of a medical staffing agency in San Francisco. And in his 40s, Brian was a founding partner of an investment management firm in Portland, Oregon. Brian has extensive experience with a wide variety of issues that are encountered by human beings who live full and challenging, engaging lives. Brian also brings the wisdom of his own life experience to his counseling and coaching sessions. His specialties include financial therapy, individual counseling, couples counseling, and small business development. Jim Corbrough, a partner with Springwater Wealth Management, will be holding the conversation with Brian. Brian, welcome, and Jim, take it away.
Thanks, Terry. And good morning, Brian. Great to see you again. Appreciate you making time for this. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. Terry already gave us a little bit of your biography there, but maybe take a few minutes to tell us a little bit more. What led you to become a financial advisor and then transition into a career as a successful financial therapist?
Well, first off, thanks for the invitation. I've been looking forward to being here today. So your first question is, what led me to become a financial advisor? I was in my 40s. I had sold a personnel agency down in San Francisco, moved back to Oregon, and was pretty much wide open and realized that I enjoyed talking to people. I enjoyed working with people. I had this background in finance. I grew up in a family that was involved in finance, and I'd worked on the trading floor for 8 years. And I met a couple people who were already managing money, and we just put our heads together and created a firm and grew it from there. But a few years after that, after I got into the business, I realized that what I enjoyed most was the conversations with people. And God bless him, my partner was so much better with numbers than I was, that I realized that I wasn't adding much value in that kind of analysis. And so it was just, I kind of found that I really wanted to have more interaction on a regular basis with people, with clients. And there were a couple, I'll tell you one specific one. I became more aware that what was going on with the clients sitting in front of me when I was an investment manager, that more money or different rates of return or diversifying their portfolio, as important as all that is to wealth management, it really wasn't addressing what they were describing that was going on in their life. And in particular, there was this couple that was sitting there, and the market had come down a bit. She had inherited this money. I don't remember the exact numbers, but I think it was like maybe 2.9 million when she inherited it, and it was down at 2.4 million. And this was one of 3 accounts I think we managed for her. And so very successful, financially successful. But that, she pointed at that number, the 2.4 million, and she said, I'll be happy when that's back at 2.9. And she really meant it. There was some, and so now I would have loved to have that conversation with her, but as an investment manager, it's not my job to say, well, really, that's because your father, you got it from your father, and is there a connection there, and all that kind of stuff. So there were other instances like that, working with individuals who would come in and they'd tell me what their goals were. And a month later, we'd have a conversation, and 6 months later, they'd come in again and they hadn't made any progress towards their goals. And so I came to understand that those were challenges that were going to require a counseling degree. So I asked my partners to buy me out, and I went up to Lewis and Clark and did my 2 years of classes and then a year of internship to become a licensed professional counselor.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting because, Terry and I and our partner, Frank Raymond here at Springwater, periodically say to each other, after a meeting with a prospective client, that degree in finance isn't helping so much, but I sure could have used a degree in psychology, right? Or behavioral finance.
That was it. Exactly. And finally, after that kind of thing in my head often enough, I said, I am going to go get that degree in counseling psychology.
Very good. Yeah. So what typically prompts people to reach out to you? What's a common thread, if there is one, that motivates them to seek your advice and guidance?
I would say the most common thread is some level of discomfort, pain, or concern that things can't keep going the way they're going. So there's the impetus is this isn't working. I have to do something, and what I've been doing isn't getting there. And then usually what happens, how they end up with me as a financial therapist is they've discovered this thing called financial therapy. Over and over again, I have people sit in my office who say, gosh, I wish we'd found out about you 5 years ago. Financial Therapy Association was founded in 2009. So, it's just over 10 years old. If you'd done a Google search on financial therapy 6-8 years ago, you would hardly come up with anything. And now it's robust. So something has happened to the people who come to my office. Frequently, it's a friend, a family member who has either been meeting with me, or they're down in California and met with another financial therapist or somewhere else in the country, or they've read an article. I recently was interviewed by the Financial Times of London. There's those things floating around. The journalists are interested in this now. So they need to know about it. And then they pair that up with the discomfort they're living with. And it's, let's give that a try.
So what does a typical counseling relationship look like with you in terms of number of sessions, period of time? Is it open-ended, or is it typically a pretty discrete start and finish? And then kind of piggybacking on the back of that, what are some of the tangible results that people can expect from working with a financial therapist? What will be their takeaways?
Good questions. So addressing the first one, it really depends on the level that the individual or the couple is coming in for. If they're, it can be 3 to 5 sessions, and that typically is more of a financial coaching issue, where there's some skill building, some clarification, some get things moving, and then check in a month later to see they're on track. And it's like, thanks, Brian, we got it from here. If in that process an individual comes to understand that they're not able to follow through on what they did, you set a plan, but then you can't execute the plan. The first thing is the plan. Let's adjust the plan and see it. But if you can't execute it on the second time, then what's going on underneath? And this comes back to what we were saying just a few minutes ago, like the person in the investment advisory office who isn't following through. And that's where the counseling comes into it. And that might be another 6 sessions, or that might open up a counseling relationship that can go on for an indefinite period of time. I mean, I've been blessed to work with clients for a year, 2 years, like every other week. And I turn into bringing counseling skills and also being kind of a accountability partner / coach. around finances, and then it starts to grow out from there. So I have some clients that I've worked with for an extended period of time. And then there's also the group that come in, we address whatever it is they're dealing with. Thank you, we're good to go. And then 6 months later or 18 months later, it's like, hey, things have shifted around. We got to do this or that changed. And so then I can be up to speed with them pretty quickly when they come in. I mean, 15, 20 minutes is like got the new story, and then we can figure out where to go from there.
Sure.
So that addresses time frame. And then the second
tangible
question,
results, kind of takeaways.
Right.
Yeah, what would my wife and I, or a brother of mine, come to take away from a financial counseling relationship?
Right. I'd say the first thing is clarity. Whatever's going on, usually when it's not working, when it's out of balance, either one, or if it's an individual, they're not getting clear in their head, they're not, just not sorted out in a way that they can take action on it. And that can be the same with a couple or like you say, family. I work with different family groupings. So when I'm saying clarity, that includes the numbers on paper kind of thing, the digits on the screen. This is what's happening here with the external scenario. But there's also a clarity of what's going on that's under the surface. And around finances, a lot of time it's around, am I secure? Is the future got enough stability that I don't have to be on high alert or even on a low alert? It's like we've got it working. But a lot of times people don't have that like in their mind that that's what they need to do. They need to speak up for those other kinds of issues. It doesn't have to be just security. It can be hopes. Are we saving enough money so that we can take that trip that we've been talking about to Europe and take a full 3 weeks and really enjoy it? Or can we, get the cabin over at the coast, or keep the cabin we've got, or get our kids through college? Whatever the goal is, and this is where the psychology comes into it. Here's the goal, the external goal. We can point to it and say, okay, that's the goal. But then there's this package of feelings and hopes and concerns around that are attached to it that really have an impact on how important the goal is, what people are willing to set aside so they're going to chain the goal. And a lot of times it just takes a while to unpack that other stuff that's around it. So a takeaway from financial therapy is clarity on both sides of the nuts and bolts practical financial part, and how it fits into your overall life. You guys have a nice graphic on your website where it's like the overlapping circles. Here's the money, and here's what
the Venn diagram, right? The Venn diagram.
I looked at that and I thought, I might steal that, because it's what's really important. But then coming at it as a counselor, as a therapist who's been trained, there might be some mental health issues here. There might be some ADHD stuff that makes it hard for one person to really track on this. Or there could be some chronic, anxiety that just makes it hard to settle down. So working with, not pathologize it, but to say, okay, those are the conditions. That how can we work within that and come to an understanding and move forward with the financial goals.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that, because of course we're not going to delve into politics. But the title of the book, written by the president's niece, I believe, is something along the lines of "Too Much and Never Enough," right? Which really kind of goes to the psychological aspects of money, of finances, of power, of control, and so it's a subjective measurement by the client rather than an objective one, and perhaps what you're doing is bringing that objectivity to the numbers, to the finances, and the relationship with money. So one thing that we encounter quite frequently is couples where the two partners have different spending habits or behaviors. How would you help them navigate something like that?
Not surprisingly, they show up in my office too. That's a challenge. That spending means different things to different people. It fills different slots in their life, different sense of belonging, and even in self-concept. How much freedom do I have? What does my house look like? Those kinds of things. So it's not uncommon that people have different spending habits. The way that I find most successful in addressing it is to make it visible, to get it up to the surface. I use a document I created many years ago, 2004. So I've been at this long enough to using the same, updating it,
Right.
the basic document for 16 years. I call it a snapshot. Some people have a reaction to the word budget, even spending plans a little too much, but just getting a snapshot of what a typical month looks like. It's remarkable. In my office, I've got a typical therapist arrangement with sofa and chairs, but I also have a table and chairs. And sometimes we're sitting at the table and spreading numbers out, or in this day and age, it's a screen share on Zoom. But getting the numbers out and visible, one of the partners or both partners will go, oh, that's what's going on. That's what we need to do. I can remember a couple, it's been some years ago, and so many times the spending doesn't show up as a great big $5,000 item that throws it off. It's $50 here, $75 there, those kinds of things that add up. And then the credit card debt is gone from 2,000 to 6,000. And how did that happen? Or maybe it's 8,000 to 14, or whatever the numbers are. It's past a threshold, and it's done it slowly. And in this case, I think it was in that $6,000 or $8,000 range. They weren't comfortable. How did it get there? And when we pulled it apart into a snapshot and looked at what a typical month was, an average month, they were spending on average over the last 12 months, whatever it was, $300 or $400 a month more than was coming in. And they didn't know that because it was going out in small bits. And it was downright cute. The two of them were sitting there, and I forget which one turned to the other and said, maybe this is why we're fighting the way we're fighting.
Right.
They had a sense that something was out of balance, that something wasn't adding up. But until we got those numbers to the surface, they didn't know what to work on. They didn't know that it was because your mother used to spend like that, or you always, those kinds of things. Now they've got an assignment. How do you cut your spending back $400 a month? And they did that. And, it was one of those really nice ones is when you get an email 6 months later that said, hey, Brian, thanks so much. That's really what we needed. We're good to go. But other times it is more complicated than that the spending actually is so tied into the self-concept that they can't visualize themselves not having a home that has all of these things, or sometimes the spending is just habitual. I'm working with somebody now she's contacted me, and she's like, this is just, it's an old habit. It makes my husband uncomfortable. I'm no longer comfortable with it. And we need to uncover it, because it goes all the way back to my high school. I can remember spending money that I didn't need to spend. So now she signed up right from the beginning to uncover the deeper stuff. Sometimes the problem will get identified, and it takes a while to get the courage to look at that. So
Sure.
That's part of my job, is to create an environment where people can feel safe enough to explore whatever level it is between these two people. A couple has made a commitment to come together, and then somewhere along the line, they realize our finances aren't working out. And so by coming to a financial therapist, my job is to create enough safety that we can really uncover what's going on and start moving towards solutions. Yeah.
Interesting.
And that visibility continues to be an important part of it.
Sure.
The Debtors Anonymous is like off to the extreme of people who have financial problems and spending problems. And in Debtors Anonymous, the phrase that they use is that the enemy is vagueness, being vague around your money. is how that kind of spending, how that kind of unconsciousness occurs. And so the assignment is to make it visible, keep it clear, and then make decisions based on the reality rather than being in that kind of gray, drifty, I'm not quite sure. And when it comes to a couple who's addressing that, I'm a big believer in meeting twice a month to talk about what's going on with the finances. And I've shifted from Quicken over to YNAB, You Need a Budget, that particular program. I'm not sure, I forget if we've talked about what program you guys use. There's different ones out there, but something that keeps the numbers up to the surface so that the couple can both have access to it. You don't get that imbalance where one person has all the information and the other person is always disempowered, but they both have some equal access to what's going on with their finances. And through trial and error, I have come to believe that twice a month is the most effective conversations for couples. Once a month, you can make it work, but it's just more, those conversations tend to be more stressful. And if you meet twice a month for 15, 20 minutes, then the couple can stay out in front of the issues, avoid the big blow-ups, avoid the surprises. And then you're not trying to do repair from surprises and blow-ups, and you can just work with it. Yeah.
Right. The molehill hasn't become a mountain, so to speak.
Exactly. Yeah.
So one thing that we come across in our practice, and I'll give you kind of two opposite ends of the spectrum, and then maybe you can share your thoughts on both of them as we kind of move through our time here. On the one end of the spectrum, we have clients, individuals or couples who objectively have more money than they'll realistically ever be able to spend. And so from our perspective, that's really an estate planning issue. Where would you like these resources to go when you get to the end of your plan? But for whatever reason, and again, there are, I think, psychological underpinnings to this, they're unwilling or unable to give themselves permission to use some of those resources to live the life that they may want to live. They may not even have articulated that to themselves, but we see them as really underspending, if you will. And then at the other end of the spectrum, of course, are people who are spending so fast, typically in retirement, but sometimes before retirement with assets that they may have inherited, for example, that they really run the risk of running out of money. And that doesn't mean running out of money, but it means not being able to fund all those goals and objectives that they have for themselves, whether that's retirement or putting kids through college or leaving a legacy to charities. So, looking at those two extremes, not giving yourself permission to live a life that you may want to because you have some underlying fear about not having enough resources versus spending like it's going out of style. Yeah.
Okay. Let's take what I think would be the easier one first, which is that they're underspending. They have enough assets that there's money being generated and they just don't feel comfortable with it. And frequently I can remember, this probably goes back 3-4 years ago, a couple in exactly that situation where it all penciled out fine. And he said one day, I've been putting money into that account. I think he was somebody who started saving for his retirement when he was in his 20s. So he had been putting money into that account for 40 or 45 years. And he said, it feels wrong to take money out of it. I've never taken money out of it. So that one was this kind of shift that to help him realize that now was a different stage of life. And that might be part of it for some couples, for some individuals. It's like, oh, if I'm not adding money to it or I'm starting to pull it out, that means I'm on the downward slope of my life. So then you've stumbled into some mortality issues when you thought you were just talking about money.
Sure. Yeah.
So addressing that, I think that's part of the larger conversation of this is a new stage of life. this is a new chapter, and the funding source is going to be different. And it also indicates other differences. So to start to explore that. One of the things that I've done in that situation that we've talked about and then the clients have done is to specifically go in and take a chunk of money out of that retirement portfolio and put it into, if not the bank account, some other account, so that it's then split apart. And it kind of addresses that issue of, I've always been putting money into that account. It's hard to take it out. And so rather than taking it out on a monthly basis or something like that, to sit down and figure out, how much do I need in this year or this next 6 months? And then that's a conversation that can happen one time and be more contained. And then action is pull money out, put it in an account that's earmarked for spending between now and a year from now. And that can serve to shift the relationship to that retirement money. So that's a little trick with the money, but a lot of times, we're human beings. Little tricks will get us unstuck. And once we're unstuck, then the new thing can come into being.
Sure.
So that's a specific one that's been helpful. I think it's 3 different people, if I'm remembering correctly, over the years.
And what about those, that are sort of the opposite end of that spectrum?
The opposite end of it. And I prefaced it by saying that this is a more challenging problem.
Sure.
Because there's if it's an awareness problem, then meeting twice a month, here's how much money, creating some way to monitor it. And that could be the solution. But by this stage of life, if the spending habits are enduring, then it probably goes beyond a solution that awareness would solve it, because there's enough awareness a lot of times and it hasn't solved it. So then it gets into more specific strategies around cash flow and the underlying therapy work that I talked about before with spending, and that with people in retirement or approaching retirement, adding on to that what their deeper values are, what their larger goals are, and make that more tangible. Because a lot of times people who are caught in those kind of spending cycles, they really have it's hard for them to assign a value to future money that floats. It's theoretical. Present experience is so much more resonant in their life than some sort of future thing 5 or 10 or 20 years down the road. It's like that doesn't register. So it's, comparing a plate of food to an idea of something. And so part of the work is to explore that, make that future more tangible, more realistic, that's something that they can, that will hold its own compared to the present experiences. That's one way to approach it. So going further into the therapeutic end of this, sometimes spending is a consolation for unhappiness. With couples, spending can be a spending at a partner. And so those are difficult to unravel. But if that's what's going on, then there's work to be done and it can be resolved. But the resolution there really isn't about the money. The resolution is what that underlying anger or unhappiness is.
Right.
So that gets into it's a double benefit if they do that, because obviously they'll have their money lasting longer, but 2, they'll have the opportunity to not live the remaining years of their life trapped in that unhappiness.
Get at the underlying issue.
Get at the underlying.
Yeah.
So in that situation, it really is as hard as it is to unravel those kinds of things, the benefits are so great. because, life is precious until
Absolutely.
angry
Yeah.
and unhappy.
Yeah.
I've got another idea along that if we're okay on time.
Yeah, we've got a couple more minutes here, and then we'll see if we have questions from our guests, and then we'll wrap it up. We want to be respectful of your time, of course.
Okay. So I'll tell one because it is kind of funny. Sometimes when it is spending, and I sit down and I work with the people and we've had those conversations, the individual who usually it's an individual, whether they're a couple or just one person who's come in, and we set out a plan and that doesn't work. And so then we set more specific, and then it gets to, okay, let's take the credit cards and wrap them in duct tape and stop using them. Or put the other one where they do is, you put it in your freezer, you put it in a block of ice in the freezer. So something that slows the spending down. And that's an extreme, strategy, but that is part of the benefit of working with a financial therapist, is that if something's not getting the job done, then let's go to the next thing. And then if that's not getting the job done, then let's go to the next thing. There is a sequence that can be entered into. And so if somebody is motivated to really address an underlying problem that is impacting their spending, the external problem, there are different strategies to approach it. And working with a professional can be successful. There's different ways to approach it, and
Absolutely.
you don't have to live with that kind of unhappiness or dysfunction in their relationship with finances.
Yeah. Well, Brian, this has been great. Terry, we're close to our end here. Do you have some questions from our audience?
Yeah, we do actually have one question, and I'll just read it verbatim. How do you work with people, Brian, to help them figure out how their philosophy about money and what is the purpose that they have relative to that in experiencing life money throughout their life?
That's an intriguing question. I'm going to open this up. How do you work with people to help them figure out their philosophy about money?
Yeah, and what is the purpose of money in life? What is it for?
Okay. Boy, that's a big question to get thrown right here at the end.
Yeah, ready. Yeah, and you have 10 seconds. Ready? Go.
Yeah. No, thank you for it's Judith. Thank you for that question. So figuring out the philosophy around money. So much of what we know about money and believe about money got inherited. We're starting to, take in rules and suggestions and guidance around money from early in our life. So I think that's one way to start, is to start to unpack, to unravel what the belief system is, what the assumptions are around money. And then the other side, I think, is not so much to come at it from the money, but to come at what is most important. What am I here on this planet for? What's this lifetime or the years left in this lifetime? What makes me most excited, gives me the sense of value, gives me that feeling that, yeah, I'm on track if I do that. And then when I drift away from it, that doesn't feel quite as good. So that's an exploration separate from the money, although you can uncover it in the money sometimes. But then it's to loop back and say, how is my use of money supporting what's most important to me? And is it, in fact, supporting that? Because if you go through that process of understanding what's most important, you might uncover that the way that money's moving through your life isn't actually supporting that. That the way money's moving through your life is a hand-me-down or a reaction against what they were trying to hand down to you. And so now you have a chance to update and make your relationship with money present tense. What's going on at this stage of your life, and to make it visible, to make it clear, and so that money can really support that.
Great,
That's
thank
super
you
helpful,
so much.
Brian.
Yeah. So we've gone over a bit. We want to be respectful of Brian's time and Jim's time, and of course all of you who have attended today. And thank you so much for participating. This is a one in a series of ongoing conversations about money, and please do look for another one coming up in December. This conversation today will be posted on Springwater's YouTube channel later today and will be available at your leisure. We wish you all a wonderful Thanksgiving and encourage all of you to please be safe.
Thanks so much, Brian. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. I enjoyed the conversation.
Take care.